Hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us today for the Aggregated API Project Kickoff meeting. I am Praveen Sanu and I'm the product manager for the company, and I would be conducting the project kickoff meeting today. Let me walk you through the slides. So, in today's agenda, we'll be covering the product strategy and vision, defining and discussing the high level requirements for the aggregator API, designing the high level architecture and discussing on the various components of the API as well as the high level architecture, evaluate any dependencies and infrastructure needs in order to ensure the API meets the required capacity, as well as evaluating any risk and compliance guidelines from the regulatory standpoint. And finally, ensuring the delivery timelines and go live dates. So, in the product strategy and the product vision, our vision is to ensure that our customers are able to access the respective aggregator applications in a secure manner, and at the same time ensuring that the customers' login credentials are kept as safe. So one of our the first product vision is to empower our customers to control how they want to share their banking account login credentials in a secure manner with their aggregators. Secondly, to build awareness amongst our consumers to protect and educate them with the adversities of sharing the login credentials with third parties. Third, to empower our customers to provide consent based access to their financial data, view the list of aggregators consuming the data, and stop sharing the data as and when needed by the customer. On the same lines, our product strategy is to ensure that we are competitive in the market, and hence we have compared various competitors of our company, which is Wells Fargo and BBVA, and they have developed similar functionality of aggregator API projects to protect their customers. And lastly, we want to ensure that we provide enhanced, best in the market, easy and simple, as well as best in the class features to our consumers. So, looking forward to designing and defining and discussing the high level requirements, a couple of things that are important here is to collaborate with the lines of business folks around in the room to gather the requirements for the aggregator API project. Secondly, document these requirements on the Jira board in the form of epics and user stories. This helps us to track these user stories and also measure the success of the respective user story so that the respective features are then delivered as a whole. When you're when you're writing the epics and user stories, there are some guidelines that I would like you guys to ensure that those are followed. The first is make sure that you add an owner to the user story, write the acceptance criteria for each of these user stories, add story points to these user stories, and ensure that you have taken care of the dependencies, assumptions, and risks. Next is we want to look at the high level architecture for this API. Aggregator API, since it's a partner consuming API, it will be exposed externally via the developer portal. And here's our high level architecture wherein the end consumer can provide access to their customers through a client mobile application, through the mobile applications that Intuit provides or Yodlee or Plaid provides. Consumers log into the application of their Intuit. I'll take an example of Intuit. They would log into the application, and then from there, it would open a pop-up saying that please provide us access to your bank account. And then once the user clicks on that, it will take the user to our bank's web page, and user would not directly just enter his user ID and password on the Intuit application. Instead, it would open a web link which will take the user from the Intuit application to our bank's website, wherein the user would enter his user ID and password, and then an OAuth token would be generated out of it. And that OAuth token has a specific validity which would be shared with the respective aggregator, which in this case is Intuit. So when we look at here the high level architecture, the user logs in from the mobile application, it hits the backend, which is our API gateway, and then calls the respective features of the API, which are designed in the form of a microservices architecture, and so on and so forth. We'll also have this discussed and vetted with our architect here, and we'll get more insights and details on how exactly does the call flows, and we'll make sure that the tiers are defined in order to ensure the security of these applications. The user will also be able to view the aggregators that he or she has shared his data on our bank's traditional website, wherein there'll be an icon. Once the user logs into his online banking portal, he'll be able to see a page wherein he can view a list of all the aggregators that the data has been shared with, that the user has shared his login credentials with, and he will be able to stop at any given point of time with whichever aggregator he wants to stop sharing his financial data. The next is we also want to evaluate any dependencies and infrastructure needs for this project. Some of the dependencies that I have highlighted here are availability of the development environments like the sandbox, validation, production environments, availability of all resources during the development phase, just to make sure that all the resources are available and none of them are on PTO, etc. We also want to make sure that we have a compliance clearance from our risk and compliance team to ensure that we are good to go ahead and all the risks have been evaluated. I'll have a separate slide for this. Other than that, we have server configuration, which is whether it is up to scale or not. Moving on to infrastructure needs, since there might be capacity that would be required to meet to provide best customer experience, we want to make sure that there might be marginal additional servers that would be needed to accommodate the capacity requirements. And lastly, the team has appropriate tools with the respective licenses for those tools that are in place, so that our developers and testers can efficiently test the API using these various tools. Moving on to the next slide, evaluating the risk and compliance. So here we have the business and risk compliance team, and we want to ensure that any of those requirements are designed and defined with the compliance in place, considering all the monetary and regulatory implications that the API project might have. We have various payment and aggregator project regulatory compliance groups, formally widely known as NACHA and FSISAC. So our risk and compliance team would vet against the project risks and provide us an approval. Coming to the last slide, wherein we have the delivery timelines and the go live dates. So in the delivery timelines, we want to ensure that the line of business teams are in agreement, as well as the rest of the teams are in agreement with the sprint development teams, as the sprints run for 2 weeks, depending on the requirement. Some sprints work for 1 week, some sprints work for 2 weeks. So the line of business teams are in agreement with the sprint development timelines, and the product is delivered in time. So here for this project, we'll be delivering it in 3 phases, in 3 releases essentially. The first release would be for the authentication platform, which would be released on Jan 2020. And here's the sprint development timeline starting from the 1st of Jan to mid of Jan. And then in the remaining 1 week, will be allotted for hardening all the features that have been developed in that specific sprint cycle. And then that part of the feature would be released to the public, and the go live date is 31st of January 2020. Second release would be for the portal, which will be done on February, and this will be followed with another 2 more sprints, and would be released on the 28th of February 2020. And lastly, we'll have a dashboard wherein the customer will be able to view all the list of aggregators that he has shared, and have the ability to stop any of those sharings with the aggregators. The deliverable release date is March 2020, and the sprint begins on the 1st of March and goes all the way till the end of March. And finally, the go live date for that would be 31st of March 2020. And hence, so in this format, we'll be delivering the entire project in 3 phases, in 3 releases, and make sure that we meet our customers' expectations, our lines of business expectations, and overall success for the bank. Thank you so much. And I wish we have a great success for our project. And I look forward for all your contribution and the journey towards the success of the bank. Thank you so much.